In a small snow-covered town, a little girl writes a letter to Santa from the corner office. She doesn't ask for toys, but for a home where her mother can smile and sleep warm again. Across town, a lonely executive finds the letter by accident, and something inside him stirs. This innocent request will unlock doors long closed by pain and bring together three hearts that never imagined becoming a family. In the week leading up to Christmas, Aspen Creek would awaken under a white blanket that turned the streets into silent postcards. The coldest town in the region, dressed in its finest winter attire, with frost covering the apple orchards and snow accumulated on the roofs of the wooden houses that dotted the hills. The biting wind coming from the mountains brought with it the smell of burning wood and the promise of more cold to come. People walked hurriedly, huddled inside thick coats, while the shop windows already displayed Christmas decorations that contrasted with the heavy grey of the sky. In the neighborhood farthest from the town center, where the houses were smaller and the streets less cared for, a small ground-floor apartment in an old building housed two souls fighting the cold in ways that went far beyond the temperature. Marina was only 6 years old, but her brown eyes carried a seriousness that didn't match her age. Sitting on the cold living room floor, her legs crossed and a thin blanket over her shoulders, she held a red pencil between her small fingers and wrote with the concentration of someone carrying out an important mission. The letter, taking shape on the crumpled paper, didn't ask for dolls, bicycles, or video games. Marina wrote slowly, forming each letter with care, her tongue sticking out in concentration. Dear Santa Claus from the corner office. She had seen that building a few times when she accompanied her mother to the bus stop. It was different from the others, taller, with windows that reflected the sky, and a revolving door that seemed like something out of a movie. Marina was sure that if Santa Claus really existed and worked somewhere, it could only be there. A place where people wore nice clothes and carried important briefcases. A place where real things happened. I don't want toys this year, she wrote in trembling letters. I want Mommy to stop crying when she thinks I'm asleep. I want a house where the heater works and she doesn't have to use 3 blankets. I want her feet to be warm again and for her to smile the way she used to, back when we lived in the other city. Marina paused for a moment, biting her lower lip as she thought about what else to write. The sound of the key turning in the lock made her look up. Quickly, she folded the letter and hid it under the blanket, turning her attention back to the drawing book beside her. Beatrice entered the apartment, bringing with her the smell of fresh bread and exhaustion. At 32, she seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime on her stooped shoulders and in her deep, dark circles. The white uniform from the bakery where she worked was stained with flour, and her brown hair, tied in a loose bun, had stray strands framing her pale face. She smiled when she saw her daughter, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a smile Marina had already learned to recognize as the kind adults make when they want to hide their sadness. "Hi, my love. Were you drawing?" Beatrice's voice was soft but tired. Marina nodded, hugging the blanket tighter. "I drew us at the beach, remember? When we went last summer." "I do remember, sweetie. It was a beautiful day." Beatrice knelt beside the girl and kissed the top of her head. "I'm going to make dinner, okay? I managed to bring home some leftover rolls today." While her mother moved around the tiny kitchen, Marina waited for the right moment. When Beatrice went into the bathroom to take a shower, the girl took the letter, put it inside an envelope she had saved from an old bill, and wrote on the outside in her best handwriting, "For Santa Claus at the corner office." She didn't know the exact address, but she was sure that if she put it in the mailbox of that tall building, the letter would reach its destination. The next day, while Beatrice worked the morning shift, the neighbor who looked after Marina took her for a walk to the town square. The girl asked to pass by the glass building, and when the neighbor was distracted talking to an acquaintance, Marina approached the entrance. There was a blue mailbox next to the revolving door with the inscription, "Business Mail." To the girl, that was confirmation she was in the right place. With her heart pounding, she slipped the letter through the slot and whispered a silent prayer before running back to her neighbor's side. Across town, on the top floor of that same building, Robert Caldwell watched the snowy landscape through his office window. At 43, he had built an empire in the wine and rural tourism industry, turning Aspen Creek into a national benchmark. His company exported award-winning wines and organized tourist experiences that attracted visitors from all over the country. But all that success came at a price he paid in silence and loneliness. 3 years earlier, Julia had passed away. Not suddenly, but after months of battling an illness that consumed not only her body, but also the dreams they had built together. Robert still remembered the last time he saw her smile, a week before she was gone. She was lying in the hospital bed, holding a small yellow sweater she had knitted. It was for the daughter they never got to adopt. They had started the process 2 years before the diagnosis, visited shelters, filled out forms, dreamed of decorated rooms and noisy breakfast mornings. But the illness interrupted everything. "Promise you'll continue," Julia had whispered that day, holding his hand tightly. "Promise you won't give up on living." Robert had promised. But promising and keeping a promise were different things. Since then, he had taken refuge in his work, turning the office into his only real home. He ate dinner alone at expensive restaurants, slept few hours, and avoided any situation that might awaken feelings he had locked away. The yellow sweater remained in a dresser drawer in the bedroom, along with photo albums and letters he didn't have the courage to open. "Robert, I brought today's mail." The voice of Marcia, his assistant for over 10 years, pulled him from his thoughts. She entered the office carrying a stack of envelopes and documents. "There's quite a bit. That mailbox at the entrance keeps getting the wrong letters. I think people mistake it for the post office. You can leave it on the bon table. I'll look at it later." Robert turned his attention back to the spreadsheet on his computer, but Marcia didn't leave immediately. "There's a different letter here. It looks like it's from a child." She placed a crumpled envelope on top of the pile, with childish handwriting on the outside. Robert picked up the envelope without much interest, but when his fingers touched the thin paper and saw the trembling handwriting, something inside him stirred. He opened it slowly, pulling out the folded sheet. As he read the words written in red pencil, the noise of the office around him faded away. The little girl's voice leaped from the paper with a sincerity that cut through all the defenses he had built. He read it once, then he read it again, and one more time. Each word was a gentle blow to his emotional armor. The simplicity of the request, the purity of that child's concern for her mother, the genuine belief that Santa Claus could fix things. Robert felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. His eyes stung, and he had to blink several times before he could control the emotion that threatened to overflow. "Marcia," he called his assistant back, his voice hoarse. "I need you to find out who sent this letter. There's a street name here at the bottom, Hydrangea Street. See if you can find any information." Marcia took the letter, read it quickly, and her eyes also filled with tears. "I'll find out, Robert. Leave it to me." It took 2 days. Marcia was efficient and discreet. She discovered that the address corresponded to a set of old apartments in the working-class district. Through conversations with local shopkeepers and a few strategic phone calls, she identified a woman named Beatrice, who worked at St. Joseph's Bakery and had a young daughter named Marina. The description matched. A single mother from another city, facing financial difficulties, but hard-working and honest. When Marcia delivered the information, Robert remained silent for several long minutes. He knew the rational thing to do would be to send an anonymous donation, perhaps through a charity organization. But something stronger than reason was driving him. He needed to see who had written that letter. He needed to look into the eyes of that little girl who still believed in Santa Claus and in miracles. The next afternoon, Robert parked his discreet car a few blocks from the address and walked to the old building. The snow had let up, but the cold was still intense. He climbed the few steps to the faded wooden door and knocked 3 times, his heart racing in a way it hadn't in a long time. Beatrice opened the door cautiously, holding a wooden spoon in her hand. Her face showed surprise at seeing a well-dressed man standing there. "Can I help you?" Robert swallowed hard. "Good afternoon. My name is Robert Caldwell. I received a letter, a very special letter." He took the envelope from the inner pocket of his coat. "I think your daughter wrote it." Before Beatrice could answer, a high-pitched voice came from inside the apartment. "Mommy, who is it?" Marina appeared behind her mother, wearing pink flannel pajamas and thick socks. When her eyes landed on Robert, and then on the letter in his hands, her whole face lit up. "You're the Santa Claus from the corner office." She spoke with such certainty and joy that Robert felt his chest tighten again. Beatrice looked at her daughter, then at Robert, and finally at the letter. Her face turned red. "Marina, what did you do?" The girl showed no remorse. "I wrote a letter, Mommy, like you said I could. And I put it in the mailbox of the pretty building, because Santa Claus lives in important places." Robert crouched down to the girl's level, his eyes shining with an emotion he could no longer hide. "You wrote a very beautiful letter, Marina. And do you know what happens with special letters like yours? They always end up in the right place." Marina smiled, revealing a small gap where a tooth was missing. "So you're going to help Mommy?" Beatrice, still at the door, seemed torn between embarrassment and suspicion. "Look, Mr. Caldwell, I don't know what my daughter wrote, but we don't need charity. We get by as best we can." Robert stood up, facing the woman. "I understand. And I didn't come here to offer charity. I came because your daughter reminded me of something I had forgotten." He took a deep breath. "May I come in, just for a few minutes? I promise I'll explain everything." Beatrice hesitated, but there was something in the man's gaze, a sincerity she recognized, a pain she also knew. Slowly she opened the door and gestured for him to enter. The apartment was small and simple, but clean and organized. Robert noticed the broken heater in a corner, the blankets piled on the sofa, the bills on the small coffee table. Marina watched him with curious eyes, as if she were in the presence of a magical figure who had stepped out of a fairy tale. Robert sat in the chair Beatrice offered, and for the first time in 3 years, he began to talk about Julia, about the yellow sweater, about the interrupted dreams, about the loneliness that consumed him, and about how that simple letter had broken something inside him, something that needed to be broken so he could feel again. Beatrice listened in silence, tears streaming silently down her face. Marina came closer and placed her small hand on Robert's. "You're a sad Santa Claus, but we can help you too." And at that moment, in a cold apartment in a forgotten neighborhood of Aspen Creek, 3 lonely souls found a spark of something they had all lost: hope. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you will ever hear in your life. Robert left that apartment transformed. It wasn't a visible transformation or one that could be explained in simple words, but something profound that was happening in layers, like snow accumulating flake by flake until it completely covers the landscape. On the way back home, he drove in silence, Marina's words echoing in his mind. "You're a sad Santa Claus." The brutal simplicity of that observation had struck a place he had kept closed for so long. That night, for the first time since Julia had passed, Robert opened the drawer where he kept the yellow sweater. His hands trembled as he touched the soft wool, and he allowed the tears to come. He cried for the wife he had lost, for the daughter he had never known, for the years he had wasted hiding behind spreadsheets and meetings, but he also cried because in that small, cold apartment he had felt something be reborn, a spark, a possibility. In the following days, Robert couldn't stop thinking about Marina and Beatrice. Marcia noticed the change in her boss. He was more distracted, looked out the window more often, and there was a new restlessness in his movements. On the morning of the 3rd day after their meeting, he called her into his office. "Marcia, I need you to do something for me." Robert handed her a handwritten list. It was long and detailed. "I want all of this arranged discreetly. Nothing that seems ostentatious or could embarrass anyone." Marcia read the list and smiled. Her eyes shone with genuine joy. "Finally, Robert, you're finally coming back." He didn't reply, but the small smile that appeared on his lips said it all. Meanwhile, in the apartment on Hydrangea Street, Beatrice was trying to process what had happened. The visit from that man had left her confused and uneasy. She was used to fighting alone, to not depending on anyone, to building walls to protect herself and her daughter. But Robert didn't seem like one of those men who offered help expecting something in return. There was real pain in his eyes, a pain she recognized because she carried her own. Marina, on the other hand, was radiant. She told anyone who would listen that Santa Claus had visited her house. The Sachs, neighbor who looked after her during the day, listened to the stories with a mixture of amusement and concern, advising Beatrice to be careful. "You don't know this man, Bea. He might seem sincere, but you never know these days." Beatrice knew her neighbor had reason to be worried, but something inside her, an intuition she had learned to trust over the years, told her that Robert was different. Still, she remained cautious, protecting her heart and her daughters. 4 days before Christmas, when Beatrice arrived home after her afternoon shift at the bakery, she found Marcia waiting at the building's entrance. Robert's assistant was elegant in her grey wool coat, but her smile was warm and genuine. "Beatrice, I'm Marcia, Robert Caldwell's assistant. He asked me to come talk to you. Do you have a few minutes?" Beatrice invited Marcia in, her heart racing. Marina was at the neighbor's house, which allowed them to talk privately. The two women sat at the small kitchen table, and Marcia got straight to the point. "Robert didn't want me to come without calling first, but I thought it would be better to talk in person." She placed an envelope on the table. "He has a proposal. It's not charity, and you'll understand when I explain." Beatrice opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter written in Robert's own handwriting. She read it in silence, and as the words took shape in her mind, she felt a mix of emotions she couldn't name. The letter explained that Robert owned a property on the outskirts of Aspen Creek, an old farm that had been renovated and now housed a winery and some auxiliary buildings. Among them was a guest house out back, small but comfortable, which had been empty since the old caretaker retired. Robert offered for Beatrice and Marina to stay there until Christmas, or for as long as they needed. In return, he only asked that Beatrice look after the main house a few times a week, to cook, organize, and bring life back to a space that had become cold and empty. "It's not charity," the letter said. "It's a fair exchange. You would be giving me something money can't buy, the chance to have a house that feels like a home again." Beatrice looked up, her eyes moist. "Why is he doing this?" Marcia took Beatrice's hand across the table. "Because Marina's letter reached him in a way nothing else has in 3 years, and because he recognizes something in you that he himself has lost: courage, determination, the strength to keep going, even when everything seems impossible." Beatrice was silent for a long moment. Part of her wanted to refuse, to maintain her independence, not to put herself in a vulnerable position. But another part, the part that was tired of fighting alone, that wanted to see her daughter grow up in a warm, safe place, whispered that it was okay to accept help, that it didn't make her weak. "Can I think about it until tomorrow?" she finally asked. "Of course," Marcia smiled. "Robert said you should take all the time you need. But Beatrice, can I say something? As someone who has known this man for 10 years, I can assure you he is genuine. And I think you two might be exactly what he needs to start living again." That night, after Marina had fallen asleep, Beatrice stayed awake, looking out the window at the dark sky. A few snowflakes were beginning to fall again, dancing in the yellow light of the street lamps. She thought about all the years of struggle, all the times she had put on a smile even when she wanted to break down. She thought of Marina's father, who had left before the girl was even born, leaving only empty promises. She thought of the small town they came from, where opportunities were even scarcer than in Aspen Creek, and she thought of that sad-eyed man who had appeared at her door, carrying her daughter's letter, as if it were a treasure. The next morning, Beatrice called the number Marcia had left. "I accept the offer, but on one condition. I want to work for real. I don't want to feel like a charity case." Robert's voice on the other end of the line sounded relieved. "You have my word, Beatrice, and thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance." The move happened quickly. The next day, a cold but sunny Saturday, Robert arrived with a pickup truck to get Beatrice and Marina. The girl was so excited she could barely stand still, jumping from one foot to the other, while her mother packed the few bags they owned. The drive to the property took about 20 minutes. They left the center of Aspen Creek and drove up winding roads that cut through snow-covered apple orchards and vineyards. Marina never stopped asking questions. Are there animals? Is there a Christmas tree? Is the house big? Robert answered each one patiently, and Beatrice noticed how he smiled genuinely when he interacted with her daughter. It was a different smile from the polite one he maintained when he looked at her. With Marina, he seemed lighter, more real. When they arrived, Beatrice held her breath. The property was more beautiful than she had imagined. The main house was a two-story, colonial-style building with white walls and dark wooden windows. Surrounding it was a garden that, even under the snow, showed signs of having been well cared for in other seasons. A little way off, connected by a stone path, was the guest house. It was smaller but charming, with a covered porch and a chimney that promised warmth. Robert led them to the guest house first. He opened the door and allowed them to enter. Beatrice stifled a gasp. The interior was immaculate. A living room with a fireplace, an equipped kitchenette, a master bedroom and a smaller room with a single bed, already made with colorful polka-dot sheets. Everything was clean, organized, and there were fresh flowers in a vase on the table. "Marcia helped me get everything ready," Robert said, his hands in his pockets. "I hope you like it. If you need anything, the main house is right there. You can call me any time." Marina had already run to the smaller room, squealing with delight. "Mommy, there's a window that looks out at the mountain, and there's a teddy bear on the bed." Beatrice turned to Robert, her eyes shining. "Thank you, I don't know what to say besides that." "You don't have to say anything." He held her gaze for a moment that seemed to stretch on. "Welcome." In the following days, a delicate routine began to form. Beatrice would wake up early and go to the main house, where she would prepare breakfast for Robert before he left for work. She discovered he liked toasted French bread with butter, strong coffee, and fresh fruit. In the afternoon, she would organize the rooms, do laundry, and prepare dinners that she would leave warming for when he returned. Marina often accompanied her, exploring every corner of the property with the insatiable curiosity of a child. Robert, for his part, started coming home earlier. He, who used to work late at the office, now found himself eager to return. Not just for the hot food waiting for him, but for the small changes he was beginning to notice. Fresh flowers in the entryway, soft music playing in the kitchen, the sound of laughter coming from the garden. The house was waking up from a long, silent slumber. One afternoon, as Beatrice was preparing gingerbread cookies in the main house kitchen, Robert arrived earlier than usual. He stopped at the kitchen entrance, observing the scene. Marina was sitting on the counter, her legs dangling, licking raw dough from a spoon, while Beatrice laughed and pretended to scold her. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the two of them in a picture so perfect that Robert felt his chest tighten. "You're home early," Beatrice said when she noticed him, wiping her hands on her apron. "Finished my meetings early." Robert entered the kitchen, feeling both like an intruder and completely at home. "Are you making cookies?" "Gingerbread cookies," Marina announced proudly. "Mommy makes the best in the world." Robert approached, took a still warm cookie from the baking sheet and took a bite. The flavor exploded in his mouth, bringing back memories of old Christmases, of childhood, of simpler times. "This is delicious, Beatrice, really." She blushed slightly. "It was my grandmother's recipe. She used to make them for me when I was little." At that moment, Robert made a decision. "Do you two have plans for tomorrow afternoon?" Beatrice shook her head. "Why?" "I wanted to show Marina something. And you too. It's a surprise." Marina clapped her hands, excited. "I love surprises." The next day, a sunny Sunday, despite the intense cold, Robert took them into town. They parked in front of an old building in Aspen Creek's historic center, a two-story structure with a facade that needed repairs but had a nostalgic charm. A for-lease sign hung in the shop window. "What is this place?" Beatrice asked, intrigued. Robert smiled. "Remember when we talked about dreams? That first night we met? You told me your dream was to have your own bakery, a cozy place with a yellow awning and the menu written in chalk on a blackboard." Beatrice froze. "Yes, but I never thought it would be possible." It was just a dream. Robert took a key from his pocket. What if it didn't have to be just a dream? This building is available. It's in a good location, has good space, and with a few renovations it could be exactly what you imagined. Beatrice looked at the building, then at Robert, and back at the building. Robert, I can't accept this. It's too much. It's way too much. I'm not giving it to you, he said softly. I'm proposing a partnership. You bring the talent, the hard work, the dedication. I'll provide the initial investment. We split the profits. It's a business, Beatrice, a fair business. But what if it doesn't work? What if I fail? And what if it does work? Robert countered. What if you create something wonderful? Something that brings joy not only to you and Marina, but to the whole town. Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face. For years she had buried that dream, convinced it was impossible, that it was foolish to imagine anything bigger. And now here was this man, practically a stranger, offering not just help, but belief. Belief in her ability. Marina tugged on her mother's hand. Let's go inside, Mommy. I want to see what our bakery will look like. And so, with her heart pounding and her hands trembling, Beatrice accepted the key. They entered the empty building, and while Marina ran around exploring every corner, Beatrice and Robert walked slowly through the space. She pointed out where the tables would go, the glass counter for the bread, the large oven, the coffee machine. Robert listened attentively, making mental notes, watching how her eyes shone in a way he had never seen before. And in that moment, amidst the dust and silence of the abandoned building, something changed between them. It wasn't just gratitude or compassion, it was connection. It was the recognition of two souls who had lost their way and were, slowly, finding not only themselves, but each other. The weeks that followed were of a quiet and transformative intensity. Aspen Creek was preparing for Christmas with lights in the streets and decorations in the shop windows, but within that property on the hills, something much more profound was happening. Beatrice and Marina were no longer just temporary guests. They had become part of that place, filling empty spaces with laughter, conversations, and a presence that Robert didn't realize how much he had missed. Beatrice woke up every morning with a renewed sense of purpose. While preparing breakfast in the main house, she would find herself humming old songs, something she hadn't done in years. Marina, for her part, had turned Robert into her adventure companion. Every afternoon when he returned from work, she would wait for him on the porch with something new to show him. A new drawing, an interesting pebble she had found, or simply a story about her day. Robert, who had spent 3 years avoiding emotional connections, found himself completely surrendering to the little girl. He taught her about the vines, explained how wine was made, told her stories about the region's first settlers. Marina absorbed everything with an insatiable curiosity, and Robert found himself rediscovering the pleasure of teaching, of sharing knowledge, of seeing the world through the eyes of a child. But it was with Beatrice that the most subtle and significant changes occurred. They began to have dinner together, the three of them, at the large kitchen table in the main house. At first, the conversations were polite and superficial, but gradually, the layers were peeled away. Beatrice told him about her childhood in a small town in Ohio, about her mother who had raised 4 children alone by working as a seamstress, about the dreams she had stored in an imaginary box when the reality of life became too heavy. Robert, in turn, began to talk about Julia, not with the paralyzing pain of before, but with a gentle sadness and acceptance. He showed Beatrice pictures of her, told stories of how they met, of the plans they made, and on one particularly cold night when Marina was already asleep and they were talking by the light of the fireplace, he finally showed her the yellow sweater. It was for the daughter we almost had, he said, holding the piece of clothing carefully. Julia knitted this in her last few months before she got too sick. She made me promise I wouldn't give up on living, but I broke that promise until you two showed up. Beatrice gently touched the sweater, feeling the texture of the wool and the love that had been woven into every stitch. She wouldn't give up on you, Robert, and I think she sent Marina to you, somehow. Do you believe that? He asked, his eyes fixed on the fire. I believe the right people come into our lives when we need them most, and that true love never completely dies. It transforms, it continues, it finds new paths. Beatrice paused. "Julia loved you very much, and I think she wants you to be happy again." Robert turned to her then, really looking at her for the first time since they had started that conversation. In the glow of the fireplace flames, he saw not just the tired woman who had opened the door that first day, but someone strong, resilient, beautiful in her authenticity, and he felt something stir in his chest, something he was sure had died along with Julia. In the following days, the changes on the property increased. Robert hired a crew to begin renovations on the future bakery building. Beatrice went there every day to monitor the progress, taking notes, choosing colors, planning every detail. Robert accompanied her whenever he could, impressed by her vision and determination. She didn't just want a bakery, she wanted to create a space that was welcoming, that made people feel at home. "I want that when someone walks in here, they smell fresh bread and remember their grandmother's house," Beatrice explained one day, standing in the middle of the empty space. "I want it to be a place where mothers can come for coffee while their children play in the corner. I'm going to set up back there. A place that's more than a business, that's a community." Robert watched her eyes sparkle as she spoke, and he realized something. He was no longer just helping out of compassion or because of Marina's letter. He was doing this because he believed in her, because he wanted to see her shine. Because the idea of waking up every day and not seeing her there, not hearing her voice, not feeling her presence, had become unbearable. A week before Christmas, a heavy snowstorm hit Aspen Creek. It was one of those storms that completely transforms the landscape, covering everything with a thick layer of white and forcing people to stay indoors. The roads became impassable, the power went out in some neighborhoods, and the entire town seemed to enter a state of suspension. On the property, Robert lit the fireplace in the main house and invited Beatrice and Marina to stay there while the storm passed. The guest house had heat, but he didn't want them to be alone. Or maybe, if he were honest with himself, he didn't want to be alone. They spent the day preparing dinner together. Marina helped decorate cookies while Beatrice made a vegetable soup that filled the whole house with its aroma. Robert put on soft music, and for the first time in years, his house felt truly alive. As night fell and the snow continued to fall outside, the three of them settled in the living room around the fireplace. Marina eventually fell asleep on the sofa covered with a soft blanket. Beatrice tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and returned to sit next to Robert. For a long moment, they just watched the flames dance, a comfortable silence between them. "Beatrice, I need to tell you something." Robert finally broke the silence, his voice low so as not to wake Marina. She turned to him, her heart quickening. "You can tell me." "In these last few weeks, something has changed for me." He didn't look at her directly, keeping his eyes on the fire. "For 3 years I just existed. I didn't live, I didn't feel. I was stuck in a place between the past and nothingness, and then a letter arrived written by a little girl who still believes in miracles, and everything started to change." Beatrice waited, barely daring to breathe. "But it wasn't just the letter," Robert continued. "It was you, the way you fight for your daughter, how you face hardships without losing your essence, how you dream even when everything seems impossible, and how you brought light into this house, into my life, without even trying." He finally looked at her. "I know it's very soon. I know you might not feel the same way, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel is just gratitude or friendship." Beatrice felt tears well up, but they weren't tears of sadness. "Robert, I feel something too. I'm afraid to feel it, because I've learned not to trust easily. But when I look at you, I see someone genuine, someone who understands pain but also the ability to start over. And that scares me and comforts me at the same time." "Can we take it slow?" he asked, reaching out to gently touch her face. "No pressure, no expectations. Just see where this takes us." Beatrice covered his hand with hers. "We can, but I need you to know something. Marina is my priority. She always will be." "And I wouldn't expect anything different," Robert smiled softly. "In fact, that's one of the things I admire most about you." They sat there, hands intertwined, watching the fire as the snow fell outside. They didn't kiss, They didn't make grand declarations, but in that shared silence, a promise was made. The promise to try, to open their hearts again, to build something new on the foundations of what had been lost. In the following days, however, an obstacle arose. Beatrice began to receive calls and visits from acquaintances in town. The news that she was living on Robert Caldwell's property and that he was investing in a business for her had spread. And with the news came speculation and judgment. One of the employees from the bakery where Beatrice worked approached her with feigned concern. "B, everyone's talking. They're saying you took advantage of him, that you used your daughter to get money. You need to be careful. These things can get ugly." Another acquaintance was more direct. "Rich, men don't do anything for free, Beatrice. He's going to collect on this somehow. And when he does, it might be too late for you to get out." These words planted seeds of doubt in Beatrice, not because she believed Robert had bad intentions, but because they awakened her own insecurities. She began to question herself. What if people were right? What if she was being naive? What if she was putting Marina at risk by trusting someone she barely knew so much? Robert noticed the change. Beatrice became more distant, more formal. She still did her chores in the house, but she avoided long conversations, no longer accepted his dinner invitations, and returned to the guest house as soon as her work was done. Marina noticed too, and constantly asked why Robert didn't have dinner with them anymore. He tried to talk to her a few times, but Beatrice always had an excuse, until 5 days before Christmas, he decided he needed to do something drastic, something that would show her who he really was, without masks or barriers. That morning, he knocked on the guest house door earlier than usual. Beatrice answered, surprised, still in her bathrobe. "Robert, is something wrong?" "I need you to come with me," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Please, it's important." Beatrice hesitated, but something in his eyes convinced her. "I'll get dressed quickly." They left Marina with Marcia, who had arrived early for that very purpose, and Robert drove in silence for about half an hour. Beatrice didn't ask where they were going, just watched the snowy landscape pass by the window. Finally, they arrived at a small cemetery on the hills, surrounded by snow-covered pine trees. Robert parked and turned to her. "I've never brought anyone here. Not Marcia, not friends, no one. But I need you to see, I need you to understand." They walked among the headstones until they reached a well-tended one, with fresh flowers in a vase. The name engraved was Julia Mendez Caldwell. Robert knelt before it, and Beatrice stood by his side, respecting the moment. "Hi, love," Robert said softly, as if Julia could hear him. "I brought someone for you to meet. I know it might seem strange, but I think you would have liked her. She's strong, like you were, a fighter, and she has an incredible daughter." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I tried to keep my promise, Julia. I tried to live, but I couldn't until a letter came. A letter from a little girl who still believes in miracles. And that letter led me to Beatrice." He stood up, still looking at the headstone. "I loved you with everything I had, and a part of me will always love you. But I can't live in the past anymore. I can't use you as an excuse not to try again." He finally looked at Beatrice, tears streaming down his face. "And I think you want me to be happy, for me to find love again, for me to live the life you can no longer live." Beatrice felt her own tears fall. Robert approached her, holding her hands. "I brought you here because I need you to understand. I'm not replacing Julia. I'm not using you to fill a void. I'm choosing to start over. I'm choosing you, not out of gratitude, not out of pity, not out of loneliness, but because when I look at you, I see a future. I see possibility. I see love." He took a deep breath. "And if you don't feel the same, that's okay. We'll still be friends, you'll have your bakery, and we'll go on with our lives. But if you do feel it, even just a little of what I feel, then I'm asking you, don't let fear or the voices of others destroy this before we even have a chance to find out what it could be." Beatrice looked at him, then at Julia's headstone, and back at him. She wiped away her tears and took a step forward. "I do feel it, Robert. I'm scared, yes. Scared of getting hurt, of Marina getting hurt. But I also feel something I haven't felt in a very long time. Hope, joy, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, I deserve to be happy too. She touched his face gently. Thank you for bringing me here, for showing me who you really are, for trusting me enough to let me into the most painful part of your heart. And then, there in the snow-covered cemetery, under Julia's silent gaze, they kissed for the first time. It was a gentle kiss, filled with promises and possibilities, a kiss that didn't erase the past but opened the doors to the future. The return from the cemetery was different from the journey there. The silence in the car was no longer filled with tension or doubt, but with a serene, shared peace. Beatrice looked out the window, watching the snowy landscape, and occasionally felt Robert's gaze on her. When their eyes met, they both smiled, a small, intimate smile that said more than 1,000 words could express. When they arrived back at the property, they found Marina and Marcia making cookies in the main house kitchen. The little girl ran into her mother's arms as soon as she saw her, then turned to Robert with that spontaneity only children possess. "You two look different," she announced, tilting her head to the side. "You're glowing." Marcia laughed, wiping her hands on her apron. "This girl doesn't miss a thing." Robert knelt down to Marina's level. "You know why, little one? Because today was a very special day, and I have something important to ask you." Marina's eyes widened with curiosity. "What?" He glanced at Beatrice, asking for silent permission. She nodded, her eyes already moist. Robert turned his attention back to Marina and held her small hands. "Marina, you taught me to believe in good things again. You and your mom brought light into my house and into my heart, and I would very much like to be a part of your family, for real, as a father to you and a partner to your mom, but only if you want me to, because your opinion is the most important of all." Marina was silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then her little face lit up with the biggest smile Robert had ever seen. "You want to be my daddy, my real daddy?" "If you'll let me, yes," he confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. The girl threw herself into his arms, hugging him tightly. "I've always wanted a daddy, and you're the best Santa Claus in the whole world." Even Marcia had to wipe her eyes. Beatrice approached, placing a hand on Robert's shoulder as he still held Marina. In that moment, the three of them formed a complete circle, a family that fate had brought together in an unlikely but perfect way. The days that followed were a flurry of preparation. Christmas was coming, and with it a decision Robert had made. He didn't want to wait. He didn't want to let any more time pass without formalizing what his heart already knew to be true. He wanted Beatrice to be his wife. He wanted Marina to be legally his daughter. He wanted to wake up every day knowing that these two souls belonged in his life as much as he belonged in theirs. On Christmas Eve, while Beatrice and Marina were in town buying ingredients for the Christmas dinner, Robert called Marcia for an important conversation. "I want to marry her," he said bluntly. "I want to do it on Christmas Day here on the property, simple but meaningful. Do you think I can organize everything in one day?" Marcia looked at him, her eyes shining. "Are you serious?" "Completely," Robert replied. "I've already wasted 3 years of my life, Marcia. I'm not going to waste another single day. Beatrice is the person I want to grow old with. Marina is the daughter my heart has always wanted, and there's no better time than Christmas to officially start this journey." Marcia stood up and hugged her boss, something she rarely did. "Then let's make it happen. Give me a few hours and a list of what you want." Robert spent the entire afternoon making calls, organizing details, preparing surprises. He contacted a justice of the peace, who was a friend, and agreed to perform the ceremony. He hired a small group of local musicians. He asked the town florist to prepare simple yet elegant arrangements, and most importantly, he went to a jewelry store in downtown Aspen Creek and chose 2 rings. An engagement ring for Beatrice, delicate and timeless, and a wedding band that matched his own. When Beatrice and Marina returned, he greeted them at the door with a mysterious smile. "What are you plotting?" Beatrice asked, suspicious but amused. "You'll find out tomorrow," he said, kissing her forehead, "but I need you to trust me." That night, after Marina was asleep, Robert and Beatrice sat on the porch of the main house, wrapped in blankets as they watched the snow fall gently. The sky was clear, and the stars shone with an intensity that only happens on cold winter nights. "Beatrice, I know our relationship is new," Robert began, holding her hand. "I know it's barely been a month since we met, and under normal circumstances this would be crazy, but there's nothing normal about what we feel. There's nothing common about what we've built." Beatrice looked at him, her heart racing. "What are you getting at?" "I'm getting to the future." Robert stood up and knelt before her, taking a small velvet box from his pocket. "To the rest of our lives." He opened the box, revealing the ring that sparkled under the soft porch light. "Beatrice, will you marry me?" Beatrice brought a hand to her mouth, tears streaming freely. "Robert, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he smiled through his own tears. "Say you want to build a life with me. That you want Marina to have a father. That you want to wake up every day knowing you're home, you're safe, you're loved." "Yes." The word came out as a whisper at first, then stronger. "Yes, I will. 1,000 times yes." Robert placed the ring on her finger, and then pulled her into a deep, passionate kiss. When they parted, he had one more revelation. "And there's one more thing," he said, unable to contain his excitement. "I've arranged the wedding for tomorrow. Here, on Christmas Day. I know it's sudden, but I can't wait. I don't want to start the new year promising things. I want to start it by living them." Beatrice laughed through her tears. "You're crazy, completely crazy." "Crazy about you," he agreed. "So, what do you say? Will you marry me tomorrow?" She kissed him again, and that kiss was all the answer he needed. Christmas Day dawned with a crystal-clear blue sky and the sun reflecting on the snow in a way that turned everything into diamonds. Marcia arrived early, bringing a simple but elegant dress she had bought for Beatrice and an adorable white dress for Marina. There was also a new suit for Robert. When Marina woke up and found out what was happening that day, she squealed with joy so loudly it echoed throughout the property. "Mommy's going to be a princess today, and I'm going to be the flower girl." The ceremony was set up in the garden in front of the main house. Even with so little time to prepare, Marcia had managed to create something magical. There was an arch decorated with holly branches and red ribbons. White chairs were arranged in a semicircle, and though there were few, each one was occupied by someone special. Marcia, of course, a few close employees from the company, the neighbor who used to look after Marina, and, to Beatrice's surprise, 2 of her sisters, whom Robert had secretly invited and who had made the long journey from their home state overnight. When Beatrice appeared at the door of the house, Robert's world stood still. She was beautiful in her simple white lace dress, her hair down in natural waves, a small bouquet of wildflowers in her hands. But what struck him was not just her external beauty. It was the light in her eyes, the certainty in her steps, the genuine happiness that radiated from every pore. Marina walked ahead, tossing white rose petals that had been carefully preserved in a greenhouse. She took her mission seriously, making sure each petal fell in the right place. When she reached Robert, she stopped and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Take good care of my mummy, okay? She's very special." "I will take care of her every day of my life," Robert promised solemnly, "and of you too, little one." The ceremony was short but deeply meaningful. The justice of the peace spoke of love that overcomes adversity, of families formed not just by blood but by choice, of new beginnings that honor the past while embracing the future. When it was time for the vows, Robert held Beatrice's hands and spoke in a firm voice. "Beatrice, a month ago, I was lost. I was living, but not feeling. I existed, but had no purpose. Then a letter found its way to me. A letter written by a little girl who still believes in miracles. And that letter led me to you. You taught me that it's possible to start over. That it's possible to love again without betraying what was. That it's possible to build a new home on the foundations of what we've learned from pain." He swallowed the lump in his throat. "I promise to be your partner, your friend, your safe harbor. I promise to be the father Marina deserves, and I promise to wake up every day with gratitude for having you in my life. Beatrice had to wipe away her tears before she could speak. "Robert, I spent years fighting alone, believing that was my fate, that I didn't deserve to rest, didn't deserve to be cared for, didn't deserve love. You showed me I was wrong. You showed me that strength doesn't mean doing everything alone, that accepting help isn't weakness, and that love can arise in the most unexpected places if we have the courage to open our hearts." She smiled through her tears. "I promise to be your companion in all moments. I promise to honor the memory of Julia, who was important to you. And I promise to build a family with you based on love, respect, and joy." When the justice of the peace declared them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was interrupted by Marina, who threw herself between them, forcing a group hug that drew laughter from all the guests. The celebration that followed was intimate and warm. They ate the delicious food Beatrice had prepared, listened to music, danced in the snow. Robert opened a bottle of his best wine, and everyone toasted to love, to family, and to new beginnings. As night fell and the guests departed, the three of them were left alone in the living room before the fireplace. Marina, exhausted from all the emotion, was asleep on the sofa. Robert and Beatrice sat on the floor, leaning against each other, watching the flames. "Look at that," Beatrice pointed to something on the wall. Robert had framed Marina's original letter and hung it next to the fireplace. Beside it, there was a photo of Julia, smiling radiantly. "She's part of this story," Robert explained. "Without her, without the love we shared, I wouldn't have become the man I am. And I think she's happy wherever she is, knowing that I found you." Marina stirred on the sofa and slowly opened her eyes. Seeing the two of them, she smiled sleepily and crawled over, snuggling between Robert and Beatrice. "Best Christmas of my life," she murmured before falling back asleep. Robert kissed the top of her head, then looked at Beatrice. "Mine too." In the days that followed, life found a new rhythm. Robert began the legal process to officially adopt Marina. The bakery was almost ready to open, with a planned launch at the end of January, and the house that was once cold and empty was now full of life. One afternoon, already in January, Robert came home from work and found Marina in the garden, building a snowman. She saw him and ran to him. "Daddy, look what I made," she shouted, and the word daddy sounded like music to his ears. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, lifting her into his arms. "Where's Mommy?" "Inside. She's making that chocolate cake you love." They went inside together, and Robert found Beatrice in the kitchen, her hands covered in flour, humming softly. She looked up at them and smiled. "You're home early." "Couldn't stay away," he said, kissing her and setting Marina down. "This house calls to me." Beatrice touched his face tenderly. "This is your home, Robert. Our home." That night, after Marina was asleep, Beatrice handed something to Robert. It was a new letter, written in Marina's firmer handwriting, but still with that childish touch that melted his heart. He opened it and read aloud. "Dear Santa Claus, from the corner office. You didn't bring toys. You brought something much better. You brought a real home. You brought a daddy for me and love for Mommy. You brought laughter and warmth and the feeling of being safe. You're not just Santa Claus, you're my dad, and I love you very much. Thank you for hearing my wish, your daughter, Marina." Robert couldn't hold back the tears. Beatrice hugged him, and they stood there united, while outside the snow continued to fall, covering Aspen Creek with its white mantle. Beatrice's bakery opened in February and quickly became the heart of the neighborhood. Just as she had dreamed, it was more than a business. It was a place where people gathered, shared stories, created memories. The yellow awning became a symbol of hope and new beginnings in the town. Marina grew up loved by two parents, carrying within her the certainty that miracles exist when you have the courage to believe. Robert began to live fully again, honoring Julia's memory while building a future with Beatrice. And Beatrice, who for so many years had carried the weight of the world alone, finally learned that sharing the load didn't make her weak. It made life lighter, sweeter, more complete. Years later, when Marina was a teenager, she found the original framed letter in the living room. She read the words she had written when she was just 6 years old and smiled. Sometimes, she thought, the purest wishes really do reach the right places. And when they do, they don't just transform lives, they transform entire destinies, because that's what happened that Christmas in Aspen Creek. A simple letter, written with a red pencil and sincere hope, had united 3 lonely souls and created a family that none of them knew they needed, but that all of them deserved. A family built not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the courage to believe that even in the coldest of winters, spring always finds its way back. And in that house on the hills, where the snow falls generously and the wine ages in oak barrels, love also ages. Not losing strength, but gaining depth, becoming richer, more complex, more complete with each passing year. Because that is the truth about happy endings. They are not full stops. They are just the beginning of a story that continues to be written day after day, with every gesture of affection, every shared laugh, every difficulty overcome together. And that story, started by a letter and a heart willing to believe in miracles, would continue to be written for all the days to come. Outside, the snow falls. Inside, love warms. And somewhere between heaven and earth, Julia smiles, knowing her last wish was fulfilled. Robert was living again. And he was doing it in a way more beautiful than she could have ever imagined. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Robert, Beatrice, and Marina has deeply touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of new beginnings, hope, and true love, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment stood out to you the most. Was it the meeting at the apartment door, the visit to the cemetery, the wedding in the snow, or perhaps that simple letter that started it all? Every day we bring intense and engaging stories like this one, revealing the deepest and truest side of the human soul, showing that it's never too late to start over, and that love always finds a way. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with a new story that will move and inspire you.